بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى أصحابه بجهدهم كما هذا الدين فرضي الله عنهم أجمعين. يا ربنا زدنا علما وتقوى واغفر لنا ذنوبنا ونعوذ بك من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا وبارك في أوقاتنا ونصلي ونسلم على الدوام على النبي الكريم وهو الإمام، وهذا من الإسلام والركن الإيمان أن نؤمن به وأن نشاهد للناس أنه هو النبي خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين. أما بعد, in this session we wanted to briefly talk about the Imam Salih Abdul Sami' al Maliki al-Azhari, not necessarily from a biographical angle, given the fact that a solid biography of Imam Salih remains to be available to the masses, so to speak, or to the general population. Imam Salih is known as al Abi, and many people who read the works in Maliki fiqh, they're familiar with al Abi. And one of the points that I wanted to mention in brief is that Imam Salih, he commented on most of the major works that are studied in the Maliki madhab, whether they're at the beginning level, intermediate level, or advanced level. In other words, you literally can study his books and you will be studying the beginning of the madhab till the end of the madhab, and in that there is surely a benefit. Imam ibn Khaldun rahmatullahi alayhi had mentioned that one of the detriments to studying fiqh in the Maliki school was the number of what we call mukhtasarat, or abridged text. The mukhtasar is usually a small terse text which compresses a lot of information in a short space, and that's why many books of this nature demand explanation. And usually the explanation of these books, they go on and they expand out into multi-volume texts, given the language that's used. A lot of times too, there's debate regarding what is said, because the author of the Mukhtasar usually is trying to convey as much as possible in a sentence without utilizing or employing a lot of language or being extra, as they say. And so that brings benefit and it brings harm, intellectually speaking, because sometimes what you're left with is lack of clarity in what's being said. When a person tries to be extremely brief in their speech and they want to say a lot at one time, a lot of times this what is left is lack of clarity. Areas of misinterpretation are possible. And so the ulama, they begin to debate on these points. Sometimes another issue that comes up is that a mukhtasar can be written. And not only does it need to be explained, but a mukhtasar, it can be written and it can contradict many of the opinions which are already known in the bigger books, in the more advanced books. And so then you're left with this situation in which you may read something in your early studies in a particular book, and then in the intermediate studies you read something else, and then what you encounter is what you encounter is a contradiction between what you read in the first stage of your knowledge versus the intermediate stage. It's understandable that in the advanced stage there may be some contradiction there. That's understandable. Because, when you start going into things of more detail and so on and so forth, different scenarios, you start to get a more broadened understanding of an issue. But in the jump from the beginning to almost about the intermediate or to intermediate stage, if you're finding that there's too many contradictions in what you're studying, that can be harmful to the student. So al Abi, because he's thoroughly familiar with the madhab, al Abi explains the early books, the beginning books, the intermediate books, the advanced books. And because he's doing that with familiarity in the madhab, he creates a shield for you. That shield that he creates for you is a shield by which the problem that I just alluded to, or directly mentioned actually, contradictions faced in studying, that problem is addressed. Another thing that al Abi does is not only does he make it easy for you to study the beginning of the madhab and not necessarily fall into like, why, I just read over here in this place that this is how we do it. Then over here saying this is how we do it now. Getting outside of that, what al Abi does also, especially because most al Abi's books are written in the Arabic language. So that's just a reality I forgot to mention. But another thing that al Abi does, which is very important, is that he uses a language. He uses a language that's clear. And so that becomes especially important when you're reading Mukhtassar al Khalil. Because Mukhtassar al Khalil is one of those books in which the Imam, he took the Ummuhat of Ibn Hajib. And Imam Ibn Hajib, he has summarized so many books in the madhab in a book that he called al-Ummuhat. And Imam Khalil, what he did basically is summarize that. And so, the Ummuhat and Mukhtasar al-Khalil are like a summary of so many books in the madhab. And so what al Abi does is, rahmatullahi alayhi rahmatun wasi'ah, what he does is, he simplifies the language of Mukhtasar al-Khalil. And so it gives you a clear insight into what's being said. A lot of ulama in al-Azhar al-Sharif, they undertook this type of work in curriculum development. That they would explain a lot of the books that were, or are we call today, traditional books. Although I don't like that term, but just for the sake of simplicity. And they presented the knowledge to students in a way in which they can understand and comprehend. And so al Abi, he follows in that tradition, is the movement to simplify the works of the ulama that came in the past, or tabsit al-turath, as they say. Tabsit al-turath. And it is basically clarification or simplification of the books that the ulama in the past have written, and what some people like to call tradition. Simplifying, clarifying the tradition. It's one thing to claim to want to follow the ulama's works of the past, is another thing to understand how to deal with them. So I want to close by saying that al Abi, rahmatullahi alayhi, he represents that tradition of simplifying the works of the ulama that came before. And in specific, within the Maliki fiqh works, what he did was create a system of commentary which is seamless. a system of commentary which operates from the beginning stage of the madhab to the advanced stage of the madhab with continuity. That is rare to find. That you can study the books of a particular madhab with commentary by one person, although that person didn't write those books. Ibn Qudama in the Hanbali madhab, he wrote his own curriculum. He wrote all the books from the beginning to the end, and he did them with the purpose of building someone that will have the capacity to be a mujtahid in the madhab. But to see someone from the beginning to the end create a systematic, seamless, almost like commentary from the beginning stages of the madhab all the way to the point of Mukhtassar Khalil, and he didn't write any of those works, all he did was comment on them, that's indeed a rare feat. That's not to mean that others didn't do it, but it's something that's not always common, at least in the books that are popular, right? At least it was popular out there. And so I advise myself and those students who are into Maliki fiqh and want to, even if they don't have a grasp of the Arabic language right now, to really focus on the books of al Abi. I had said this years back. It was a project that I had to introduce these works, but alhamdulillah, it didn't go through. But in any event, it's something that needs to be a point of focus, because al Abi, what he does then is he gives you confidence in the study of these books, which sometimes traditional books, they become, arduous. It becomes difficult to work with them. And then not only that, you're dealing with the past. So you're dealing with a time gap between now and then. And so to have someone that can clarify these books, that has depth in the madhab and understands the strengths and weaknesses, that's a major contribution to the intellectual development of a student of knowledge. And unfortunately, in this environment of critique, and everyone knows, and everyone is a scholar and a mujtahid, and everyone is a master of hadith and the sunnah, and I'm saying this, in a critical way. The ulama of Azhar, a lot of times they don't get a lot of play, unless they're famous, they're known. But especially nowadays, given the political climate, the ulama of al-Azhar al-Sharif, a lot of times they don't get the respect that they're due, that they used to have before. But al Abi is one of those scholars which deserves note and deserves respect, given the things that I had said. So we'll close with that, and I'll say that any serious student of the madhab, alayka bi al Abi, focus on al Abi. And even if you're going to have someone teach you the madhab, that's a nice request to study the works of al Abi, because al Abi, he explained the books that are used are traditionally used anyway, at the beginning stages, at the intermediate stage, and at the advanced stage. So may Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala accept from Imam Salih Abdul Sami' al Abi al-Azhari al Maliki, and allow us to benefit, inshallah, from his works, because they definitely are beneficial. And just to bring it to an end, he did explain the Ashmawiyah, the Akhdari. He explained the Azhariyah. He explained the Rissalah, and he explained Mukhtassar Khalil. And so you have all of those works that take you from the beginning of the madhab to the end of the madhab, in which he did that. Studying traditional works without a teacher almost becomes a disaster. That's why I said I don't really agree with the concept of pushing tradition if you don't have the educational institutions to really, undertake the task of education. It's better to just let people read modern stuff, clear works, than to try to force the tradition on them, because the tradition was never meant to be a self-read, type of a curriculum where you just study by yourself. The tradition always entailed that there's a teacher in place. And so in any event, that's the closest that you're going to get to something like that, is the works of al Abi, who clarifies, simplifies, and presents to the people the madhab in a way that's comprehensible. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.